1, 2.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, that's better. Okay, welcome to this meeting of the Overview Committee. My name's Councillor Paul Prentice, Chair of this committee. The Overview Committee undertakes pre-decision scrutiny of reports going to the Cabinet on the Council's policies, projects, budget and services. And we also have present at this meeting from the Cabinet, Councillor Alan Baldock. He's the leader of the Council and he's here to observe the debate as part of our early engagement before any decisions are taken. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being filmed and made available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. If you are seated in the public gallery, it is possible that the cameras may capture your image. If you wish to avoid being filmed, it is recommended you make a member of staff aware who can direct you where to sit. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening, but should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. 2 of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please meet at Café des Amis. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked at dusk, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. Pippa, do we have any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Councillors Carnac, Flanagan, Heaver and J. Stockley, Chair.
Thank you. And do we have any substitutes this evening?
We've got Councillor Jones for Councillor Carnac and Councillor Thomas for Councillor Stockley.
Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest from members or officers at this stage? Councillor Naomi Smith.
Pippa, your microphone's not working properly.
Is it not? I think. Yeah.
I think
Okay, thank
the
you.
light
We'll
might
have
be
a
on
look.
the blink, literally on the blink.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. There's one public speaker registered for this meeting. Do we hear them now, or do we hear them? No, at that item. That's fine. Has everyone seen the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of October? And can they be agreed? Councillor Mellish.
I don't usually intervene, Chair, on minutes, especially at the meeting I wasn't at. But can I just, I am assuming there's a mistake on page 8 of our document, page 3 of the minute, page 3 of the minutes, under key points included, on indent 9, it says that Beacon Hill was included in the draft local plan. As far as I know, this has been another reiteration I've not been aware of. There's no mention of Beacon Hill in the draft plan. It should be Beacon Road. And there's great controversy over that, which we will come to at some point in our discussions. But that's what I'm sure that's what they were referring to as Beacon Road and the green area there.
I can see that, and we can check that and make sure that's corrected if it needs to be. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Otherwise, are those minutes agreed by general assent? Agreed? Yeah, thank you. So we'll move on to item 6, which is the draft housing asset management strategy. That's pages 11 to 66 of your packs. And considering the report of Marie Royal, Director of People, and Alexis Jobson, Head of Facilities Management, and they're both here tonight. And I'd like to invite Alexis to make their introduction.
Thank you, Chair. So the report tonight brings along the draft housing asset management strategy. This strategy sets out our high-level framework for managing our residential portfolio, and also reflects significant changes in the operating and legislative landscape for social housing, which includes the changes brought about by the Social Housing Regulation Act 23 and the Council's own target for decarbonisation. The strategy sets out a number of objectives linked to 5 key themes. But I'd also like to draw attention to some of the really key pieces of work that we're focusing on. The regulator's inspection this year drew attention to the gaps in our stock data, which we have reported on previously. And because of that, those gaps in our stock data, we've not been able to report on decent homes and to be able to make the decisions that we'd like to make around how we maintain our properties, which should always be based on good data, which we've not had. So we are carrying out stock condition surveys, which to date we have done in-house, with increasing from 1 through to 3 surveyors. But due to a number of reasons, this has been a slower process than we would have liked. And this, together with a number of properties that we haven't been able to access, means that at this point in time, we've completed 27.5% of our surveys. The remaining ones are the hard to access ones, which we are continuing to work on in order to get access to. But we have made the decision to put a minimum of 1,230 of our properties out to an external company to get these done and to meet our commitment to get all of our stock condition surveys done by July next year to the regulator, although we anticipate that we'll get them done before that. The data from these surveys will enable us to identify how many of our properties reach the decency standard, and we can then begin to formulate really good plans to remedy these. As set out in the strategy, all of this is woven into the key themes and the objectives. We already carry out a lot of work to our properties. We use the data that we've got to the best of our ability, and we change where we need to. But having this reliable data will enable us to do all the things that we need to do that are set out in that strategy in terms of our plans. We have funds available once we get the Decent Homes data through next year to start work on this. We've already got budget put aside, capital budget that we work through, but we've got a larger maintenance fund created from 27 and 28, by which time we will have the data and we'll be able to put together really well-targeted plans. This is all in alignment with the HRA budget document. We also have the benefit of £6.2 million grant from the government, together with our own match funding, which we are using to bring a number of our social houses up to EPC standard. Again, that ties in with one of the main objectives in the strategy. And we're doing that through a range of different measures, including external and loft insulation, new windows and doors, and other such things. There's a lot going on at the moment. The strategy pulls it all together. It sets us some very clear objectives between now and 2028. So I'd like to hand it to you to consider and to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. And sorry I didn't introduce Susie earlier in place of Marie. I'd like to ask if anyone's got any questions at this point. So I see Councillor Naomi Smith first, and I'll take Councillor Mellish afterwards.
Right, thank you. And thank you, your team and everybody. I know that this has been a mammoth struggle to get any idea of what our stock looks like. And there's a national shortage of surveyors as well, which has compounded the problem. And a lot of competition for surveyors, particularly in the southeast. I wondered if you could clarify a bit for me on what the decency standard is, because I know there used to be the Decent Homes standard way back in John Prescott, who introduced it, but that was all scrapped. And is this a new iteration of that? And how does that work? Thank you.
Sorry, just before you begin your answer, my mistake was that I should have said what we're doing is we're recommending to the Cabinet that the draft housing asset management strategy for the period 2025 to 2028 is adopted. I should have just mentioned that bit. Over to you for your response. Sorry about that. I need a seconder for that, ideally. Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Naomi.
Yes, I mean, the Decency Home Standard, or the Decent Home Standard, is an iteration of that. We have to report on those figures every year, and it takes into account a number of different factors about the age and condition of different elements of the home, and also some of the health and safety hazards within the home that are measured through what we call a housing health and safety rating system. So there's a number of factors that feed into that, and it is quite complicated. We've been doing, so you need good data to get that information out, and we have some of it, but we haven't had all of it. However, we have been working on a calculation that we can produce hopefully later this year that will give us an indication, if not the actual 100% situation, but at least give us a good indication of where we are so far. Okay.
Councillor Mellish.
Thank you. And apologies, I can't see Alexis, but we're away from here. It's the design of this building. Thank you again. It is an excellent report. And I realise that you are working under extreme conditions, as it were, to try and bring us something. Just a couple of points for clarification, really, rather than sort of anything else. Under item 7 on the implications of the on working documents. I know it's a working document for change, but on page 14 you talk about the financials under A. And the completion of the stock saving likely to be identify significant costs. But then you say a budget is going to be allocated for the next financial year, which obviously will be in April 2026, I take it. And then you talk about this might mean include additional staff resources that will be reviewed when stock condition survey is done. But the stock survey is not going to be done until July 2026. So can you explain how the budget will be put together some 3 months, 4 months prior to the survey being completed, let alone understood and digested? And if I may, Chair, just one similarly, really, just a bit, again, for clarification, on page 42, when you talk about the goals, and have I got it up here? Sorry. On page 42, it says to establish 5-year work delivery plans for procurement and delivery following the stock condition survey data in 2027. I assume you mean that you will establish the 5-year work delivery plan in 2027 following. It's the way and similarly on the next indent as well, it says to develop with finance 30-year investment plans following the stock condition survey data in 2026. So obviously what you really mean is in 2026, you will develop the 30-year finance programme. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so we will have the stock condition data by middle of next year. We will then need to work on that to analyse it and draw out of it to then produce the 30-year and the 5-year investment plan. So that will go on into 2027. I think what should have been clear in there that we will aim to have it done by then in order to have our plans completed from the data that we've got, and hopefully before 2027.
How do you develop how do you develop a budget prior to getting the survey data analysed?
Yeah, we can only do some very high level figures, which is what we're looking to do with the information we've got. And as the stock condition data starts to come in and grow, we can pull some information off. It won't be as detailed as we need, and we'll have to develop that as time goes on. I think in terms of what's written in the report about the additional resource, I mean, we're looking to hopefully recruit additional staff to help us work on those plans, because as well as developing the plans, we've then got to get the work done as well. We have capital budgets that we work to already, but we've got additional investment in 2027 coming forward, which will again go towards the information that we will be able to clarify once we've completed the stock condition data and got the plans done. Does that help?
Councillor Dan Smith.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report. Just with the stock data, obviously there's quite a gap as at now. Is it envisaged that there will be the gaps will be in particular areas, or are you trying to get a sample? Because from what I hear, you're trying to get, in effect, as much data as you can across the whole housing stock. So if there are particular areas that are difficult to assess, and so you have less data in a particular estate, for example, are there any such problems envisaged in that data collection process based on what you know at the moment? Thank you.
Okay. The hard to access properties, which is the ones where we don't have the data, are spread across the whole district. We haven't been able to put together any patterns as yet. But what we are doing is by outsourcing the surveys that we haven't done to the external company, the in-house team are going to be concentrating on those hard to access properties and looking at ways that we can work with tenants to allow us into their properties. I can have a look and see a bit more detail about that data, but there's no obvious trends or patterns at the moment as to where it's occurring. It's across the areas that we've already tried to get access to.
Old, please.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit more about this asset management database? Might be a question for Susie rather than for you, and how that's going to work across the council. Is that a bespoke system or is this an off-the-shelf system? The reason I'm interested in this is obviously as we move into thinking about how councils might merge and work together, are we going to be left with various systems that only work for one patch, or are we thinking ahead and making sure that we've got databases that potentially could be used across a wider area? Thank you.
So we currently have a housing system which used to be called Northgate. It's run by a company called NEC. It's a system that a lot of local authorities use. It's probably one that our neighbouring authorities do use, but I think as soon as we know the authorities we're going to be working with, we'll be having those conversations with them. We're actually doing, one of our challenges has been to get as much information as we can into that single system, and that's something that we're still working on. We've made strides on it over the last few years since housing was brought back in-house, but we're doing more work with our digital team in terms of some kind of what we call deep dives into the system to make sure that we're using it in the best way that we absolutely can. But we do rely on spreadsheets still. And we use things called loaders that update information into Northgate. So we're not there yet with a truly single system, but we're doing everything we can to work towards it. And as you've said, we'll be wanting to work with our neighbours once we know who they are to look at that.
Thank you. Councillor Botman.
Thank you. It's just a couple of things, really. One of them will be on the number of adapted properties that we hold at the moment. If you will be taking that, finding out how many adapted properties we have. And then the flip side to that is, will you be surveying how many properties that would be unadaptable? You know, and for instance, you know, I know each one is on each merit, but the simplest one would be, you know, could the doorways be widened or could a ramp be added? Because obviously some properties in their location can't have that. And then my other question is regarding the building fabric. Does that include sort of the communal spaces and gardens? As in, I've visited some properties in Wincheap, and they have ivy growing in the house, and the drains are blocked from roots from the trees and things. So I'm just wondering, would that come under building fabric as it affects the houses? Thank you.
So in terms of adapted properties, the stock condition survey itself does not record that specifically. We should have a record through our disabled adaptations team on the number of properties and the addresses of the properties that have currently been adapted. We would have a view on which properties were kind of a set of criteria, I'd say, that would mean that some properties are more adaptable than others, and we would look at that probably on a case-by-case basis, but we don't have a list of those properties that would be classed as not adaptable by address, if that makes sense, and that wouldn't be part of the stock condition surveys that we're doing now. In terms of building fabric, I mean, certainly the structure, yes, the external structure is part of what we class as the building fabric in terms of our planned maintenance. If we had block drains and ivies, that would be picked up as part of the survey and would probably come through as a repair that needed dealing with sooner rather than later. That would be the way. We wouldn't leave something like that. I think that this is more about looking at the longer term plannings, the age of the windows, the age of the roof, you know, so that we can assess the condition of them and at what stage they need to be replaced. But yes, that should be picked up as part of the stock condition and reported through the repairs route.
Councillor Mellish, I think, was next.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me have another second bite. You may not be able to, it's only a small thing in some ways, but you may not be able to answer me at this stage in terms of your development But I was pleased to see on page 44 that you were talking about using outside organisations for benchmarking for services and costs and performances. And I mean, having been involved myself in developing KPIs for the health and safety side of the construction industry, it's a very specialist sort of area, developing KPIs in this world. And I wonder if you had any thoughts at this stage about who and how you might be using to get some really good KPIs into the structure. It may be too early for you to have thought about that at the moment.
I have to be honest and say, no, that's a piece of work that we need to do. We have got KPIs. We've got KPIs as part of our contracts, and we've got our own service KPIs. But it is a piece of work that would be really helpful for us and something that we will intend to do, and we'll come back to you on.
Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I'm getting another little bite at it as well. It's about the assessment tools that we use, that you use, the surveyors use, because if you're bringing in outside surveyors, is everybody working to the same standard? So if you look at a building, and I'm going to say that's fair, terrible, or brilliant, or whatever the categories are, is everybody working to the same idea? Because you could get, I mean, I've used some of these asset tools, and it's very subjective to who puts the information in.
So they work to the same set of criteria in terms of the checks they do. I think it's fair to say that there is always an element of subjectivity, but they're all qualified and qualified in that field in terms of being able to assess the age and condition of those properties. So it should be reliable, and they're using that same set of criteria to go. It's very fixed, so that will be exactly the same. Okay.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Very detailed. It's my first time on overview, so been through it. So just wanted to just ask a question, or not really. It's point some out. It's interesting to note that 16% of our housing stock, as per the report, is pre-1919. So that creates a lot of challenges. But having said that, regarding insulation and things like that, I live in a property which is fairly old, has those challenges. But what I did notice, probably down the road, I think it was called the Elvis House. We were doing it up down the road. How we've gotten around that, or the council have gotten around the contractor. I've never seen so much external insulation put on an outside wall ever. I mean, you're talking, it was about this thick, and obviously then cladded, which is an excellent way of keeping the house warm without creating, because most people would do it internally, and that takes away basically, obviously, space, quite exactly, Naomi, and but also creates condensation in old buildings for ventilation, one thing or other. So I think the report's excellent. I think what we're trying to achieve is to get everything in order to see what we're up against moving forward. Councillor Old asked the question I was going to ask, which is regarding how we're going to interact as we move into a different system, that all the things we want to decide here, what happens in our district in Canterbury and moving forward, that they won't be potentially undone moving forward, because what's coming forward here for us is really good. And I'm just making sure that when it goes over to whoever or whatever the next council is, that these things are sort of immovable, because it's a good way forward with our housing stock to achieve the things that we're trying to for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's a really good point. And the Elvis House is a great example of what we're trying to do, which is demonstrate what works well. And I think the best thing we can do to pass into the new unitary are examples of good practice. We can pin things down to a certain extent in strategies and plans and whatever. Obviously, it's then out of this council's hands once that unitary starts. But if we can demonstrate what works and what works well and why, then I think that's a really powerful message, and that's something that we'll be articulating through the process.
Councillor Dan Smith.
Yes, this cherry is getting very well bitten with lots of second bites on. Following up from Councillor Buckman's point about the adaptive properties, you said that you had some information but not in our standard database, and I would suggest that that's something that we should look to merge into the two databases, and also at the same time, referring to Councillor Old's point, and what Susie's just informed us, that it would be sensible and prudent as good practice to check with our neighbouring authorities, regardless of which ones we end up merging with, just check with all of them to see if what type of data they hold on this at the moment, with a view to getting the best format of data, because this kind of adaptive property information is going to be quite useful and quite important going forwards, and strikes me as something that would be a good example of good practice if we've already done it and got it very clear and accessible, and would be useful to aid tenants to the best of their abilities going forwards. Thank you.
Just to clarify, so we do keep on our system information about those properties that have been adapted. What we aren't doing through the stock condition survey is collecting information about whether they can be adapted or not. So we do have data on those that have already been adapted. Okay.
Can I come back on that quickly? Is this something, again, that we could work towards? Because if we have some data, even if it's not held in the same place, I appreciate that this is not part of the surveys as it stands at the moment, that going forwards it would maybe be prudent to do that, otherwise you end up having to do it again going forwards over all the properties. And if some of these properties are difficult to get to and get the access to, then it would be prudent to actually have that information about the potential evolution of those properties in advance, and now is actually in the process of doing that.
Yeah, we can certainly take that away and have a look at it when we start, because we'll be redoing the next round of stock condition surveys at some point next year, so we can look at that as one of the things that we cover.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a comment than on this. Are we making sure that we've got the correct contractors to implement all the changes that we want to put forward? Because in the news there's quite a lot of talk about, especially when it comes to cavity wall installation, that's a lot of it's having to be undone and actually creating more work and more stress and damp, and it's not correctly installed, and that's down to incompetent installers, by it sounds on what it's saying on the news. Then it also says on page 17, keeping the house warm and because of climate change. We also need to be able to keep houses cooler, because going forward it's going to get hotter by the looks of it. I mean, I've worked outside for the last 20 years and it's definitely getting warmer, and we're getting less and less rainfall. So that's for this area. And on page 21, there's no information on the boxes. I don't know whether that's page 21, that's something to tell us, or there's no data or an example. I just don't understand what page 21's really telling us. Thank you, Chair.
So on the contractor question, you're right, there are contractors out there that we wouldn't want to work with. I mean, in terms of the retrofit work that we're doing, which is the insulation and all of that stuff, it's through quite a tightly controlled set of regulations, if you like, called PAS 2035. It's all to do with, so all of the contractors have to be vetted. We have vetted contractors that we're working with already on that, and there's a very tight process to make sure that we're using that government funding in the right way. So I'm as confident as I can be that we won't come across that problem, and that we'll be doing our own checks as well to make sure that the installations are done correctly and to the right standards. In terms of climate change and keeping houses cool, I think that's quite a difficult. I think the focus has always been on fuel poverty and about reducing the fuel costs for our tenants. It's about ventilation, I think, and being able to keep those homes kind of fresh and clean inside in terms of the air quality as well, through the ventilation. So, but yes, I'm sure that we'll be having conversations about the temperature changes as well, and also, more importantly, about how that affects things like damp and mould and condensation.
Councillor Brady.
Oh, your last, sorry, can I just come in? The last question was about the impact statement, wasn't it? Yeah, it's that one. Yeah. Let's have a look. Sorry, what? This was about, yeah, it's the date of it. Those boxes were not filled in because it was about a revised assessment and we haven't revised the assessment yet. So that's why I left them blank. Yeah, so the other boxes above it were filled in, but the ones below, it was to do with a revision. No. Maybe I should have taken them out. Might have been easier. Okay.
Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mellish mentioned KPIs, and I understand you're going to be developing them. Councillor D. Smith mentioned future-proofing with data with our neighbours for LGR. Can we look to our neighbours to see what KPIs they are using so we develop similar ones so when we do merge with our neighbours, then we're not looking at different beans to count when we count them?
I think that's definitely something we should consider doing, definitely.
Okay, do we have any other contributions on this item? No, I don't see any hands. So yeah, thank you for the report and an excellent report and very helpful. Covered a number of items around databases, adaptations, condition, some of the projects like Elvis House and how that might give us some good learning for the future, and about our contracts as well as climate adaptations. So thank you very much for that. I think we need to take a recorded vote at this stage.
Do you just want to remind people what they're voting?
Yeah, so I'll just remind you what you're voting on, which is...
Have you got it, or do you want me to?
Yep, no, that's fine. Basically, we are... Yeah, we're recommending to Cabinet that the draft housing asset management strategy for the period 2025 to 2028 is adopted. That was already proposed by me and seconded by Councillor Naomi Smith. So the vote's ready. Thank you very much, everyone. That's passed with 11 in favour. Now pass on to the item 7, which is future garage management, and that's on pages 67 to 79. And we're considering Marie Royal's report. But Tracy here is going to, Tracy Chambers, head of Housing and Community, is going to introduce it for us this evening. But first of all, I think I invite our public speaker, which is Councillor Forrester, is going to make some remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight on behalf of the residents of St Stephen's Ward, and specifically those in Hales Place. Hales Place, as many of you will know, has a large percentage of current and former social housing, and also has a large percentage of the council-owned garages referenced in this report. And these garages are something that come up every time I speak to residents, whether it's the condition of the garages themselves, the potholed paving outside, or the antisocial behaviour that the poor conditions attract. When I shared the news of the proposals on our local Facebook page, there were comments, these comments were present again, but with additional comments of some residents offering to band together themselves to improve the garages if the council wouldn't or couldn't. The inquiries had been made to rent garages previously, only to be told that there were none available due to them all being boarded up. And others who had rented their garages for long periods, sometimes nearly 50 years, and really value the facility these provide. The cost of rental is also commonly raised as an issue, but this is often about value, the cost at the moment doesn't feel justified by the state of the garages and their surrounding area. Tenants want a garage for security as well as storage, somewhere to keep the Christmas decks. But when the garages have deteriorated and accessing them, especially at night, feels unsafe, the value is just not there. So I wanted to share some comments provided to me by one resident on this matter, which show what his garage means to him and many other residents. He says, "I rent a garage at Tenterden Drive for the last 20 years plus and have seen gradually the decay of this site over this time. With no grounds maintenance and building maintenance, I have taken it upon myself to try and keep half of the site in good order, but this is challenging as I work full time." He adds, "For me, it's a bit more than a garage. It's where I keep my pride and joy. A sanctuary, if you like, where I can switch off from the outside world and tinker. And there's not many places in Canterbury where you can do this, and it's been invaluable over the years for my mental health." So I'm here, therefore, to ask that this recommendation be approved and our garages in Hales Place restored. In doing so, I ask that the council remains conscious of the cost of rental so that garages are value for money and remain affordable to tenants, and that the improvements and availability of garages is communicated to the tenants who want to use these but believe they're not available. Not only will this provide Hales Place residents with much wanted and valued facilities, but it'll improve the appearance of the area, drive down antisocial behaviour that poorly maintained blocks attract, and show residents what I already know to be true, that this council values us in Hales Place, our area, and our quality of life, and that you're all willing to invest in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Forrester, for the very timely speech. You get brownie points for that. Well done. I'd like to ask Tracy to make her introduction to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Forrester, for your comments on that. They're very much welcomed. It's something that we've been looking at for a little while and trying to see what we can do to make sure that these garage sites are in good condition, that they are looked after, and that we can do the best for the residents that are in those. So, as you can see, hopefully you've had a chance to read the report. We have got a number of garages that are currently unlet. Some of these, empty garages can attract antisocial behaviour, vandalism, unauthorised use. I will point out, though, that we don't own all of the garages. So some sites, and obviously we can look at particular sites if there are issues there, but we don't own all the garage sites. So not all of them will be owned by our HRA service or by the council. So if you have got concerns about particular sites, then it is worth putting those through to service issues, and we can look at those. And in particular, if you know the addresses of those sites, please put them through, because it could be that we could prioritise depending on what the outcome is today, if there's particular sites we need to look at. So what we want to do is trying to let as many garages as possible. Obviously, there is finances related to that in terms of money that was uncollected. So to be able to do some of these options, we would be able to invest the money that we would make back in the rental income from those garages to do this. So the garages, unfortunately, because there is so much work within our HRA service, our housing revenue account, that, working with our tenants and making sure that we've got good homes, unfortunately, garages has kind of been pushed a little bit to the back just for the other things to take more priority. But we do want to look at these. But to do this, we do need investment. So there are 3 options within the report. One of those is obviously to maintain what we're doing currently. But also the other 2 options is either to invest in staffing or to outsource to a management company. So to do either of those options, we do need some investment to do that. And we will need some capital funding because some of these garages may require new doors, new roofs, things like that, or to invest in the sites to make sure that they're in a usable condition. So the recommended option today is to outsource the garages. The reason for that is it's a quicker option. We can get it up and running quicker. We've got people with expertise that would be able to take on these garage sites, manage them appropriately, and they've got the time and resources to do that. In doing so, they would be responsible for advertising these units, finding the residents, collecting the rent for those garages, maintaining the garages, doing all the repairs and the maintenance work required for that, which means we can have more of a hands-off approach and be able to focus our resources in the right areas that we need to be doing those. Obviously, there is an option to do it in-house, and we could invest in staffing to do that. It would obviously take longer to get set up, but we would have more control over managing those sites. But if we get good contract management in on those sites, then I think outsourcing would be absolutely fine, and we would be able to manage that. And any rent that they did collect for these garages would come straight back to the council, and we would just pay that management fee to them for managing those properties. So that's just worth noting. And we would be looking with both those options to see what the commercial rates are on those garages, just so that we can make more investment in those garages. If we need to put things like cameras up or extra security on the site, it would enable us to do some of those things and make them more attractive for people. So we would be looking at what the market rents are. But for our tenants, they would still benefit from one VAT-free garage. So the additional amount on the rental income is 20% VAT, but our tenants wouldn't have to pay that for one of those garages. So they would still benefit from that. And we can, if we were to outsource, we would be able to look at the contractual framework, and we could potentially do a direct award to a company doing that. So it could be quite quickly up and running if we wanted to go with that option. And I say that is the recommended officer option. But I welcome any comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that report introduction. So I'd like to recommend to Cabinet that the management of housing revenue account garages are outsourced to a garage management company. Do I see a seconder for that, please? Councillor Mellish, thank you. And so I'll open the debate at this stage. I see Councillor Dan Smith first, quite a few hands, but I'll keep one by one. Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a quick question. With the, if we take option 2 and follow that one, because as the preferred option, I think that's probably the one that is most favoured and seems to have the least difference between option 1 and option 2, if you like. So the status quo is probably obviously not helpful, as we've heard from our speaker. But one thing it doesn't mention there is about the complaint. If there are complaints about a particular garage, how would the council be able to hold the management company to account for those issues? And what is that something that will be built into it? And also, because it's a first step for us, would the contract be something that is of a reasonably short term? I would suggest something like a 4 years or 5 years to begin with, and then so the management company have an idea of a decent timeline for them to get up and running. And then if it is not working, if there are issues, we don't get into the same situation as when the housing stock was transferred and it was awful. We don't want that with the garages. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question. So we can put anything we want to within the contract. So just on the point of kind of 4 or 5 year contract, what we can do is we just have an open contract. So we can transfer all the garages over to a garage management company, and we can bring any back within a 30-day notice period. So if we decide we want some garages back for redevelopment, or we want some back to, if we decide to let them ourselves, most of it's just 30-day notice period. So we can write that into the contract. So it doesn't tie us in. So we can just go for that kind of year period, or however long it is that we make the decision to do that. If it's not working, we can pull it back out, because I totally appreciate where you're coming from with, you know, the issues that we've had previously. So that is something we're very conscious of. In terms of complaints, so the idea on the sites is they will have boards up on all of the sites that will let them know the contact information for the company to make sure that they can contact the companies easily. If we needed to, we can do some signage if we wanted to say that they're working in partnership with us potentially, if that's something that people are keen on. But what we would do is we would have oversight of the complaints anyway, because as part of our Housing Ombudsman Complaints Handling Code, we do have to make sure that our contractors are adhering to that. So we would make sure that they only had a two-stage complaints process, and we would have oversight from the contract manager on any complaints received. So we'd want to know them straight away if there's complaints about the site, antisocial behaviour, things like that. We'd want to know what was happening so we can make sure we address that. So we can certainly make sure that's put in. Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
On that final point, I take it that data, complaints data and so on, will be something that will be brought before the Cabinet and the committees and the via report in these type of reports. So they can be discussed if there's an issue on that, and I suspect some of them may be borderline stuff that we take properties back or not in a rolling contract. But thank you.
I think my question is very similar to what Councillor Smith's just asked. Would that data come to scrutiny or a similar sort of structure committee?
Yes, the complaints data does. So what we can do with that is we can include the garage data for complaints as well. So any that are coming through from them. So that's not a problem. We can supply that data, which will come through on I think it's the Cabinet. I think it goes to at the moment. So yeah, we can make sure there's scrutiny on that. That's not a problem.
Councillor Old, I think was Councillor Mellish, I think was next. Then Councillor Butman. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Again, a disembodied voice. I'm sorry, Tracy. Just a point, I agree with the idea of actually moving it to a management company. Just some points for clarification, please. One of the paper says if properly managed, it should accrue 174,000 if we bring in the right people. Is that per year in terms of income? My other question is, says moving garages to a private company would cost in the region of 170,000. I wasn't quite sure, was that the one-time spend, or is that a spend every year that we're giving out to manage this company? And also, is it the management company that would bring the stock up to standard as part of the contract, or is this something we would pay for in addition to that management contract? Sorry, the final thing. And what are the management company making out of this? Is it just what we're paying them, or are they taking part of the rental as well? Because I can't quite see that in the document. Okay, well, Tracy will tell me.
Okay, thank you. So the amounts listed on there would be an annual amount for staffing and also an annual amount for the company. So any rent collected will come directly back to us, and then we would pay that management fee per annum for the management of the full garage portfolio. So that's the kind of estimated cost on that. In terms of the repairs and maintenance of the garages, so we can do it ourselves, but to be honest, the preference would be to do that through the management company. Just because of the resources we've got at the moment, we want to focus those on our council homes and not divert resources to garages. So that's what would happen. They would be able to do all the maintenance and repairs for us on those garages. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butman.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just a couple of things. I remember a couple of years ago, people wanted to rent a garage out, but they said it wasn't for a car, it was for storage, and they wasn't allowed to do that. So I'm just wondering, has that changed slightly? I think it was to do with, I think it was someone collecting Easter eggs from Afghan refugees, and they needed an area to store. And then just a couple of other things. I take it if we went for the management option, they would do some sort of audit on like the asbestos roofs and garage doors, so they know what they're in store for. And occasionally, when garages are left, they're left with a lot of rubbish in them, and who would be responsible for paying that to clear? Two more things, if you allow. It's good actually that you were thinking about CCTV on the garages, because some do attract a lot of fly tipping and antisocial behaviour when they run down. And the last thing is about, I think Councillor Forrester earlier mentioned about potholes in front of the garages. So who would be responsible for the actual highway part of the garage, not the garage itself? Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'll try and get through all of those. So, in terms of the garages being used for storage, I would need to double check that one. So it always used to be that you had to use it for a car, but I think listed on our site it says not for businesses, trade or professional purposes. So I would need to double check. I know there was issues around storage and fires and different things, but we can come back to you on that if that's okay, just to check where we stand on a legal status on that. In terms of the asbestos roofs and the condition of the properties, that's what the garages, sorry, that's what we'd be asking to do, which is the stock condition surveys. So they would do that as part of the management. They would go out and look at all of the stock, look at the viability, look at how much it's going to cost, and then it would be down to us to make a decision as to whether we want to invest in those garages, bring them back up to standard, do something else with those. So we do need to have a look at all of our sites and see, you know, what's financially viable, what do we need to be doing. So there will be a lot of work to do at the beginning in establishing some of that, but that will look at, you know, like you say, asbestos roofs and what's the condition and does it need a new door. Any works that need to be done on those would be done with capital funding, so we would need to have capital funding for that, and obviously the clearance of the garages would be a cost to us, but if we can charge it back, then we will charge that back to the person that's left it in that state. We'd obviously try and make sure that the garages are emptied before then, but we know there are probably garages at the moment that have got things in them, so there's probably going to be an issue around some clearance with those, but we'll deal with that as we come across them and make decisions on what we do. Potholes is always a bit of a difficult one because it does depend. Is it HRA land? If it is, then it's us and we would manage that and deal with that. But if it's highways and it falls to KCC, then unfortunately it's us trying to ask KCC to then complete the repair work that's required on the potholes. And it can get quite complicated because we have got roads that we've dealt with where half of the road belongs to our HRA land and half of it belongs to KCC. So we have had those issues previously. But if you want to send through any of those issues to our service issues mailbox, we'll happily look at them and see what we can do around potholes for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I've actually got any garages in my ward, so I am sort. It's not. I haven't got any skin in this. But I read on the option, the preferred, the preferred option 2, that the management company will collect rent for all the garages, which is included in the annual fee, and the annual fee you think is about 170k. But I'm a bit concerned that we give them 170k and they do nothing, possibly. How, there is no incentive. Is any incentives built into this contract to increase the amount of garages that are let? So that's my, What's the bet? What's in it for us and what's in it for them?
Thank you. So for them, it's about continued contracts. So we're not going to continue our contract if they're not delivering on it. And as I say, we can terminate within those 30-day notice. So they want to be doing that. Most of the companies that do this are very professional, so they want to make sure that those garages are let. We know of several councils and housing associations that use management companies now, and they found them to work quite well. And what they found is they've had a real increase in the number of lets on their garages, and they've been working together to do that. We'll obviously have to make sure that we've got robust contract management to make sure that they're adhering to what they need to be doing, and we can put things into the contract if we need to, and we can set KPIs around that with them to make sure that they're performing in the way that we want them to. Thank you.
Just come back because management companies can make me quiver as well, particularly on housing developments. Are these different types of management companies than the management companies that manage estates?
So these would be specialist garage management companies that are skilled in their particular field. So yeah, they've had a lot of experience in managing garages, and it's their bread and butter. So it's something that they know a lot about, and a lot more than we do, to be fair. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Chair. When we tested the market, how many garage management local garage management companies are there out there? So when we do put to tender, there's going to be competitive bids that come in. Councillor Smith quite rightly asked about the contract and break clauses on performance, so welcoming to hear that it's going to be a 30-day break clause. Councillor Forrester made a really good point about charges. How, I know we want to be competitive, but we don't want to price hike people who already have the garages just because we're starting or we're voting to start a management company. So how do we compare to our neighbours with the rents? And that this is also having an eye on in a couple of years' time when we align assets in a unitary. Thank you.
Thanks. So there are companies that are on the contractual framework that can be directly awarded. So at the moment, we've got our legal team looking at kind of testing the market, seeing what's available and what companies are out there. So that work is ongoing at the moment. And then obviously, depending on the outcome of this, we can look at what we take forward on that. In terms of the price hike, we do increase garage rents each year. So we would be looking at what the prices are, and we do compare against the other local authorities. So we do benchmark against those. We are looking at the prices depending on what the areas are and what the market rates are around there. So we will give due consideration, but any decisions around that will be taken, by us as officers, and the decision around those sites. So we can choose as to what we do around that, and the garage rents will go up anyway in the budget for next year, as that they do kind of every year. And it's worth noting as well, sorry I didn't say earlier, but we haven't put into the HRA budget the garages at the moment, so we haven't preempted any decision that might be made at the moment on this, so we would have to go back and review that as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to work out whether or not, if I was in business, whether I'd even contemplate and consider this one. I mean, I do quite a lot of work around on the estates because there's student accommodations that I do work in. Some of them are horrendous. I'm just thinking there's not one I'd want to personally rent to put my bicycle in at the moment. I've seen them full of rubbish and just boarded up and just forgot about. So the running costs is, as a business and replacing, and then I do all this work as a business, and then I do something wrong and I get told I can't do it after 30 days or something. I mean, I really not convinced on this at all, I'm afraid. I can't see a company taking it on. I can't see people wanting to rent the properties if they live somewhere else. If they're designed to rent out to people that've got the property, then they'll be renting them now. I'm just not convinced this is actually going to work at all. I'd be more in favour of maybe knocking some of them down and putting council housing on them. It's our land, we could certainly do that. I've proposed that several times before over the years. I'm not an expert on the area. I just look around and think, Jesus, no thanks. And I have seen, I mean, the rubbish that's in them is ridiculous. On another note, and I don't quite understand why it's on this section, on page 53, we're saying about replacing gas boilers for, and I don't know why it's in this section, but it's in this section on page 53. Basically, I have concerns about us putting in heat source pumps into all our council properties, which is what it's kind of saying. It's because of... But is that another item?
I think that's another item, Councillor.
Page 53. Oh, I've got myself muddled up. Sorry, Chair. Okay, okay. I've lost the plot on that one then. Sorry, my fault. Same thing though. About the heat source pumps, they cost a lot of money to run. So yeah.
Thank you. And, you know, I'd agree with you. A lot of the garages at the moment, people probably don't want to rent. That's true. You know, we've heard that from Councillor Forrester that they're not in a great condition. So the idea is that we would improve the sites to bring them up to a level that people would want to rent them. So we're talking about really good quality garages that would be available for people. And in terms of the sites, so we have already done some analysis of our garage sites to see which ones might be feasible for redevelopment. The problem with a lot of them is they're quite small sites, so unless you're redeveloping the whole area, it doesn't really stack up. But what we will do as part of this stock condition surveys is to go out to each of those properties, look at, you know, do we sell the site? Do we redevelop the site? Do we invest in the garages and bring them up to a standard? So we will be looking individually at every single site once we've got those stock surveys back, just to say, well, this is the condition, it's going to cost us X to fix it, what do we want to do? And we'll be able to make those decisions once we know what we're working with. But it is already something that's being considered. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Butcher.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report because I, as Councillor Forrester, have had people and complaints coming up to me and saying, why is this garage boarded when it would be feasible to rent it out? And so I would think that option 2 is the way forward. And as the previous speaker said, that sites would be looked at by site. And the back of my house was garages, and now there's 3 bungalows, and that's improved the site very, very well. So I would go along with option 2 and say that it's well worth investing the money and well worth having this company to manage it.
Thank you. Welcome that.
Councillor Jones, I think was next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, option 2, I would say, I'm assuming the whole point of doing this is to re-energise our garages and get to what Councillor Butcher just said and Councillor Thomas, to a position where we can identify not just the garages themselves, but other areas where we can maybe use for redevelopment. I mean, from financially speaking, was it nearly £400,000 we take in rent, and we're going to, which up until this year, so we're going to offer a company 170,000. So from a financial basis, it's a good option regarding that for us. I'm not assuming really, I would imagine that a company would have to come in and look at what they're going to take on, or before they would commit to say, actually, I'll do that for £170,000, because where we don't want to be, I'll be honest with you, is if that's not enough for a company to come on board and say, well, actually, there's no way we can even, with the staff, with this, that and the other, we can even start to do any kind of repairs for that sort of money. I think if we're going to drive the use of garages forward and find other ideas for different housing and that kind of thing, then we've got to be realistic and pragmatic to think that the £170,000 might not just cut it and we'll fall short before we even start. It might well do, I don't know. But bearing in mind, it says we've got 546 unlet ones, so that's nearly just under half of our garage allocation. There's potential there in one form or another for, if this company is obviously good and proactive and as not just in repairing and whatever and running companies, they've got an option to expand the base. That helps us, we'll get more revenue in, so there'll be, I'm assuming, more of an opportunity there for better income and to upgrade the garages. I mean, I had a council garage donkeys here in the 80s. That's the 1980s, not the 1880s. I'm just putting it out there, okay, for you to say. Councillor Forrester mentioned earlier, sort of tinker. Oh yeah, I used to tinker with an old car I used to have. It was great in there, and be able to use it. And it was cheap, affordable, and it was up in St Andrews Close in Whitstable. It was fairly well maintained until the hurricane in '87 came along and blew it down. So, but they are add a value to people, and if they're looked after and maintained, and have CCTV, the things that you need to have today, unfortunately, that may be something this company we could work with, and as things, if they progress, are the things what we as a council say, well, that's our expectation next year, that these areas are lit, these areas are whatever, and that we need to understand, but that can't stay, I would imagine, at £170,000. It has to be realistic if we're going to do this. It will just fall over straight away on that. I just want to put that out there. I support option 2, so I think it's a positive way. At the moment, no disrespect to us, we're not garage focused. Okay, let's be honest about it. We're not. This is an opportunity to be garage focused, and I think it's a good one. It's a safe one. You know what? Chucking the kitchen sink at it, toe in the water. We might get a company come along and no good. Get another one who's brilliant. You don't know. It's just the way it works. But I think it's a really good opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So just to be clear, the amount that we pay is a per garage fee. So that is for them to maintain the garage. So that will cover small minor repairs. So if they need to, I can't think what they're called, the springs and things on the doors, they'll do those. What they won't be doing is paying to replace the doors or the roofs or things like that. Anything that needs capital investment would need to come from us, which is why we need to allocate a capital budget to cover those repairs. But they will collect the rent for that. They will do the stock condition survey, and they will maintain the garage and rent that garage out for those fees. So we're confident that that's a reasonable fee and they would be able to do it for that. As I say, it would still need capital investment in that though. And I think that was covering your points. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brady.
Thank you for allowing me to come back, Chair. I think the important line is on page 68. So if we get all of the garages up to standards, that alleviates Mr. Thomas's concern, and then we've got a management company that is fit for purpose and manages them competently, tackles Mr. Jones's point, then we can make over £1 million a year renting these out. Why would we not do that? And I think it's an asset that we should have previously sorted out, because then the revenue that we get from this can then go towards something else. So as they say, it washes its own face, and it's a no-brainer really. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your comments on that. Yeah, just to be clear, obviously the £1 million is if we let them and we never have any void times, obviously, and then we've got offset of some of our capital costs. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We'll yeah, there's potential for us to bring in additional income, and what that will do is reinvest back in for our tenants of our council services and reinvest in services for them. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Well, most of what I was going to say, actually, Robert said. Coming from a family that has done management for various businesses, shops and so on, for the amount of garages that are here, this probably isn't something that we would have looked at for 170,000. Obviously, I've never done garages, so I don't know, but I'm interested, where did that figure come from, the 170,000 that you decided? Because obviously it could be too much, it could be too less. In my mind, I think it's going to be a bit less, because they've got a lot of garages to look after. How many staff is this management company going to have to utilise to use that? Obviously, they're doing other managements at the same time, so they're not just concentrating on our garages. But I wonder, you know, if this was me, how much of my staff's time per hours a week, let alone a month, would I have to invest in my staff to look after these garages? So I'm just curious where the 170,000 come from. Otherwise, I totally agree. I think it's a great idea, and I think it needs to be done, really. I think the council's got enough to deal with without a garages to worry about. So, yeah.
Thank you. So this was just based on one company that we've contacted. As I said, our legal team are kind of testing the market to see what other companies are out there, just to make sure that, you know, we can get good value for money and then we've got stuff on the framework. But yeah, that is based on a company that we've already spoken to that we know that other councils have used previously as well. Thank you.
Have you spoken to the other councils to find out if those companies have been doing everything? I mean, are they happy with them? You know, because obviously we don't know. Thank you.
Yeah, we've had some really positive feedback from the councils and housing associations. So yeah, we're relatively confident that it would be they would be able to do what we're asking. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Botman.
No, just a quick one actually. I think that Councillor Thomas mentioned about changing garages into social housing. I'm sure I was at planning committee a few weeks back, and we did that one on Warwick Road, and we did the 11 garages or 11 things for social housing. So I think we are looking at that. But my question, other than that, is is about would we be able to cap any incremental price rises for garage tenants?
We could. I mean, that would be a decision within our HRA budget. But what we need to remember is not all of these garages are rented out by our council tenants. Some are rented out by private tenants. And it's about making those decisions around those sites and, you know, maximising the income that we can receive for those. As I say, garage rents do go up every year anyway, and we do try and keep them and benchmark them, and they will still be benchmarked anyway. But yeah, something we could look into if it was something that wanted to be considered. Thank you.
Councillor Dan Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. Do we have any data on the reason why the 546 garages are unlet? I mean, is it just because they're falling down, or is it because they've got asbestos roofs and people don't like asbestos, or whatever it might be? And also, on the subject of asbestos roofs, I think the environmental data at the back basically says neutral, but I feel removing asbestos roofs it's a environmentally hazardous substance, which should be some marginal benefit to changing the roof over time into a non-asbestos roof. So, and perhaps there is a small benefit to be had from that. It tends to be white asbestos used in those roofs, which I think is probably the most stable form of asbestos, but it is nonetheless asbestos. It's not nice stuff to deal with. So, yeah, I mean, if I could have an answer on the reasons and also the asbestos. Thanks.
Thanks. So the reason the garages aren't let at the moment is a combination of things, mainly down to resource. We don't have the resources available at the moment for the letting of the garages, the renting of the garages, the rent collection and everything else that goes alongside that. So as I say, it hasn't kind of been prioritised. So we do think there will be some that we'll be able to let once we've done those stock condition surveys, but there will be some we know that may need doors, roofs, repairs. So until we get there and have a look, it's going to be difficult to work out on those. In terms of the asbestos roof, I don't honestly know the answer to that in terms of our carbon neutral targets and whether that will affect that, but I can certainly take that away. Thanks.
It's not exactly a carbon neutral thing, but it is an environmental factor, is the point I'm making on that. So it'd be worth checking, I think, just to make sure, because removing of asbestos, it shouldn't have actually been there. We knew it was a dangerous substance 60 years ago. So.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, getting rid of it is the right thing to do. I appreciate that. I think this directly relates to our kind of carbon neutral objectives, but yeah, we can take that away. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think, I mean, just doing a bit of a straw poll among residents in my ward, they welcome investment in our garages, which is really positive to see. I think there's a little bit of scepticism about availability and people were quite keen to demonstrate when they try and get one online, they find they can't. But what we're trying to do is make it easier for people to do that. And that's the whole idea behind this new strategy. One point that was raised was around locking systems and whether we'll be continuing with traditional systems, which some people saying actually are really outdated, ineffective, maybe not safe enough by modern standards, and whether things like keypads could be introduced, which would modernise the security of garages. Maybe introducing smart alarm systems and so on. Obviously, these things will come with cost, and there's a sweet spot, I guess, isn't there, between investing in something that people really want to use and really want to sign up to, and bearing in mind a lot of the garages are on estates where actually incomes might not be that high, and they quite like the fact that the rents are what they are. So I think that's something that Cabinet needs to consider quite carefully. There was the point raised by members about capital repairs, and I suppose, are we looking at, if we pass this option, the management option, if capital repairs are needed, will we hand over garages in tranches to a management company? So, for example, there might be, let's just say there's 200 in an initial batch, but there's another 300 that need repairs. I'm just plucking those numbers out of my head. So that you could phase the introduction, and then over time people could see that there is this gradual improvement. Because I imagine if you took on hundreds of garages at once, you would be that would be quite unmanageable potentially. Another point I had was around I think it was Councillor Thomas, or can't remember who raised it exactly, but if you're looking at taking on a large sort of stock of garages, you need quite a long time to go and view them and know which ones are the council's ones and which ones aren't. So that needs to be factored in, I guess, a sort of a viewing day or viewing few days, so they can get an idea as to what they might be signing up for. And I've probably got some more detailed comments that I'll probably send directly by email, actually, but another thing I think is around people's buy-in. We've heard a lot of comments around people, putting their own effort into maintaining these garages, which I think is really admirable, but they're doing it because no one else is doing it. And I think if we were to make the decision to go to a management sort of contract, then we need residents' buy-in that actually this is something much better, and the communication needs to be right, because I think this is ultimately a decision that's made by Cabinet, and I understand that, but we need to get people's buy-in that things will be better, and we need to sort of show them examples of garages that have been well maintained elsewhere. So a lot of this is around the marketing and the communication, because ultimately we want to get it right, and we want to create an income stream which benefits all of our residents at the end of the day. But thank you for that. That was a really helpful debate and lots of really good points raised by everyone. We covered quite a lot there around condition and land responsibility and how we use those sites, whether we use them for garages or other purposes, and how we have oversight of complaints. And I think being able to see that in a transparent way, being able to see complaints data is really important, to know that we've got the approach right if we go with this option. So I think we'll leave it there. I don't see any other hands, so we go straight to the recorded vote. So just to remind everyone then, let me just make sure I've got the wording correct. We are recommending to Cabinet the management of the housing revenue account garages are outsourced to a garage management company. And Pip is just going to set up the vote now. A garage management company. Okay, that's passed with 10 votes in favour and 1 abstention. Thank you very much. So Date of next meeting is 7 p.m. on the 10th of December. There's no other urgent business to be dealt with in public. Don't need to exclude the press and public. No other urgent business under the Local Government Act or the Freedom of Information Act. Thank you, everyone, for a great debate, and meeting closed at 2019.